Sorry to the people who were expecting this to be live on Facebook. We're having a few technical issues, but hopefully everyone can find us live on YouTube. I am here with Dr. Kirsten Lauritsen. Just as a quick intro to Dr. Kirsten, she's a functional medicine for athletes expert, and you incorporate nutrition, chiropractic, medicine, psychology, and then years of experience working with athletes, but also striving to sort of cure your own chronic illnesses and injuries. And I know you're a big believer that the whole lifestyle contributes to you having a healthy body, but you're also an accomplished triathlete yourself, and you've done quite a few sort of 70.3s and had experience in our sport as well. So thank you very much for coming to chat to us, and we'll look forward to your talk.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited. This is something that I love to do, talking on nutrition and functional medicine, and especially today, excuse me, what I'm really excited to talk about and what really I'm passionate about is helping women be able to fuel properly for their bodies, pairing functional medicine and making sure that the whole body is working properly. But then there's also a lot of just intricacies that are different between men and women. And so this is going to be a really fun talk, and it's like one of my favorite things to do. So a little further background on me. I have a doctorate in chiropractic, as Caroline mentioned, and then I also have a master's in human nutrition and functional medicine. And so I pair the two really well, of understanding how the body biomechanically works with like your muscles and your joints and that whole side of things on the physical side. And then also with this functional medicine piece where we're looking at all of the internal functions. So like how your mitochondria are doing and being able to generate energy for you, and if they're getting what they need, you're going to be able to perform really, really well. And making sure that like your gut health is on point, because your gut health plays a whole lot into your immune system, into how your body functions. And we're also seeing that gut health can actually really help with performance as well. And, detoxification and all sorts of different things that are going on in your body, hormones, all that jazz. So that's a little bit about what I do. So today what we're going to talk about is fueling, and specifically for women. I'm going to give a little bit as far as what to do if you're in your kind of reproductive phase of life. And then if you're on the other side of life where you're in a little bit of the menopause side of things and postmenopause, we'll talk a little bit of each of those sections. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about just like daily nutrition and hydration, as well as, and if I can, I'm going to cover a couple of other points about gut health and things like that, but I'll be pressed for time, I'll tell you that. So it's just going to be me talking today. If you have a piece of paper and a pencil in front of you, you're going to want to grab that real quick, just some way to take notes, because I've got lots to bring today. So let's dive into fueling. So to start this off, and to make sure that it really fits specifically for women in particular, we want to be really aware of the different phases and cycles of the reproductive cycle. So this is a very, very quick overview, because I don't really have time to like dive into it totally today, but you have two phases. You have the first phase, which is kind of considered your low hormone phase, where progesterone and estrogen are low. And that is right between day one of your period and then to ovulation. So for most people, that's going to be anywhere between 10 to 14 days-ish. Could be a little bit longer if you have a longer cycle, but you're going to be somewhere in there. And that phase is called the my brain is getting warmed up for the day. That's called your follicular phase. And then your second phase is the luteal phase. And that's your high hormone phase. That after ovulation phase is where hormones get higher, because we're building that uterine lining, right? And that's where we're potentially preparing for pregnancy. And the thing is that because estrogen and progesterone start to raise up, it actually has quite a bit of an effect on how our body functions and what we need to do as far as kind of changing how we train based on those cycles. I'm not going to talk about the training side today. I'm just going to talk about what you can do with nutrition in order to help yourself be able to leverage that a little bit easier to get performance out of both of those phases. So first things first, what you want to make sure of is we're looking at two specific things here for fueling. We're looking at carbohydrates, and then we're also going to look a little bit at protein. So, and then when we get into hydration, we're talking a little bit about the hydration changes based on that cycle as well. So this is the first thing I want you to write down. 0.35 times your weight in pounds for phase number 1, and then 0.45 times your weight in pounds for the second phase. So if you're usually used to kilograms, that's 2.2 kilograms per pound. So you just multiply your current weight in kilograms times 2.2 to get to pounds. And then you multiply that number by 0.35 or 0.45, and that's going to be a general-ish amount for you to consume in carbohydrates during your workouts. Okay, so let's say I weigh 140 pounds. I'm going to be at that first phase of that 0.35 that I was talking about. That's going to be that first phase of your cycle where you don't necessarily need as much carbohydrates per hour because your body has estrogen's low. So you're going to be using those carbohydrates. You're going to be having access to them, all of those things. In the second phase, we want to up those carbohydrates a little bit more, which is why it's 0.45 times your weight, because what that's going to do is give you a little bit more carbohydrates through food, because what happens when estrogen escalates and gets higher during that second high hormone phase right before your period, you actually spare carbohydrates, which means that you're not going to get access to them as easily. So if you are racing, if you are training, and in that time frame where you're on the other side of ovulation, we want to make sure that those carbohydrates are higher and that you have more access to them through food. This is a really, really critical piece. So, and this is just a place to start. You might notice that you need maybe a little bit more than that in order to feel like you're getting enough and you're keeping your energy up, and that's totally fine. But the key to fueling is to make sure that you have somewhere to start, and then you can tune it in specifically for you based on, well, you have to have a place to start, right? So making sure that you're consuming enough of carbohydrates in those hours is going to be really critical. And I think that's something that we tend to not get enough of, is really knowing a measurement of how much we really should be consuming. And it's usually a guess. So that's two things you want to be really aware of when it comes to how to fuel specifically for your cycle. The second thing that we want to be aware of is protein. So let me actually take a step back really quickly here. If you are working out for 60 minutes, or training for 60 minutes, you don't really necessarily need like a fueling source. But for any workout that's 90 minutes or more, you want to make sure that you're following that protocol there. So either making sure you're getting enough, a lower amount of carbohydrates in the beginning of your cycle and then more towards the end of the cycle. So hopefully that makes sense. And then the next phase here, if you are training for 2-3 hours plus, we want to make sure that part of what you have in your routine is some protein coming in as well. One of the things that happens with progesterone is that as progesterone raises up in that second hormone phase, what we want to make sure of is that you have protein coming in, because progesterone has a tendency to want to break down your muscle. So instead of your body using, so what it'll do is it'll start to, as progesterone raises, your body will want to break down your muscle tissue in order to mobilize some of that protein. So instead, what we want to do is make sure you have protein coming in to your body through food. So that's going to be a really critical piece, especially as you get closer to that period, that you have more protein coming in through your diet, through what you're using for fuel sources. The second piece of that is that also with protein, one of the things that happens, and we've seen this over many studies now, in these long endurance sports like XTRIs in particular, where they're intense, they're very high effort, and they can be very, very, very long days. Having protein in your fuel sources is going to be absolutely critical, and here's why. After a certain point, we don't really store a ton of protein in our body per se. Like, yes, it's in our muscles, but once you start to run out of protein from your fuel sources, or like what's floating around in your body and amino acids like in your bloodstream, there's a point that happens in these long endurance races where what your body will do is it will go to your gut lining, and the very minimal amount that's stored there, it'll go to that gut lining and start to try to pull some of the protein from there as well. The problem with that is what it does is it starts to create this thing called intestinal permeability or leaky gut. And then what happens with that is twofold. Number one, you aren't going to be able to use your protein and your carbohydrate and anything that you're using as far as fuel sources go. You're not going to get as much from that because already that lining is starting to, its integrity is lost in a sense, and it's starting to get a bit more leaky. And then second, that's going to obviously impact your energy towards the end of the race, but also it can then start to cause some other issues as well. Like as soon as that gut lining starts to get leaky, we can start to get some systemic inflammation starting up. And that would be more acute, especially on race day, but you might experience that as some joint pain. You might experience that as a lot more fatigue. There's a lot of things that come up once that leaky gut starts. So just a few things you want to keep in mind is just especially on that bike ride, you want to, and the long distance on that bike, you really want to make sure that your fuel sources have some sort of protein in there with it. That way you have it towards that once you transition into the run. So that's two things you want to really make sure of. The third thing I'm going to say before I transition a little bit into what you can do for menopause is you want to be very aware of the types of fuel sources that you use. Now, I know that a lot of people tend to stay away from your simple sugars because they spike your blood sugar, and we've been told that that's really bad for you, which is true. However, especially with your high intensity, these types of really long endurance events that are just, I mean, you're pushing through the whole time. Those high effort, we'll say, those races, simple sugars are going to be the easiest way to keep your energy levels up. But there's another piece to this that we want to be really aware of, which is the kind of concern with maltodextrin. And Caroline and I have talked about this in the past. But what we've seen I've actually seen several studies now looking at what maltodextrin does to the gut. And maltodextrin can actually create inflammation in the GI tract lining and then start getting you into that leaky gut phase even faster. So first off, we want to be really careful of that. And I know that maltodextrin is a very, very popular fuel source to use. So I am aware of what I'm saying right now, but we want to be really careful of that. The second thing is a lot of gels will pull, like, especially in such a high concentration, when they get dumped into the gut, even if you're, sipping water like they say you should, once that maltodextrin gets into the gut, and this can also happen with fructose as well in gel form, but that it's just such a high concentration of carbohydrate that instead of your gut being able to absorb it, what it does is it actually pulls water from your bloodstream and it pulls it into the GI tract. Now, some of you are probably going to be saying, well, I don't really get any GI symptoms, so I don't think that's happening for me, but it is happening. This is physiologically what's happening in your body. So the thing that you want to keep in mind is that, especially in these XTRIs as well, we're trying to slow down your dehydration rate as much as we possibly can, because you will work your way into a dehydrated state towards the end. There's no getting around it, especially in your hot races as well. But one way we can sort of prevent that is if we're being very particular about the way that we're fueling and making sure that it's really working with our physiology, so it's not pulling water into our gut and away from our muscles to keep us as hydrated as we possibly can. So what can you do? There's a very simple saying that you can use that I stole from Dr. Stacy Sims, borrowed, I'll say, or learned from. She says, fuel in the pocket, hydration in the bottle. So if you can try and focus on foods as whole foods as much as possible for at least on the bike ride minimum, that's going to be a really helpful way to get fuel sources in that are going to have some protein, that are going to have some carbohydrates, and they're not going to have some of those really dense carbohydrates dropping into your GI tract and then causing some of that problem. The other thing, and so some examples of that might be like some of your bars, like there's picky bars and Cliff bars and like all of those things. There's many different types you can use that are geared towards athletes. Salted potatoes are another one that are really, really popular, as well as different types of like PB&Js and Powerball type recipes. There's all sorts of things that you can make that are going to be more geared on the food side of things. But that's a really great place to start. And then I had a question in the Facebook group as well about what to do if we just are in that very high intensity kind of format and we need that really, really quick fuel, what I suggest and what I have my athletes usually try at first is to use a food source on the bike. And then we can start transitioning into those fast fuels, like we can start using gels, we can start using some stuff like that towards the end of the run or towards that side of things, so that you still have that quickly coming in, but it's not loading up in your gut on the bike and then potentially leading to problems on the run. So those are just a few things that you can easily try to keep from getting that leaky gut and some of that intestinal permeability, but also with the protein, but also making sure that your fuel sources aren't causing some of those problems as well. Now, next piece, I know I have a few minutes left, so I'm just going to keep on going here. But with hydration, what I want you to be really aware of, and the reason why sometimes we have some issues with hydration as well, is that a lot of our hydration is mixed at a 5 to 6% solution of carb to sodium ratio. And the issue with that is it's the wrong concentration for your gut to be able to optimally absorb it. What our gut can tolerate is a solution at about a 1.5 to 3% solution of sodium and carbohydrate. That's very, very different than a lot of your very popular race drinks that are usually on the side of the road, you know, as your aid stations. So one thing I just want you to be very aware of is that we want to make sure that that hydration solution is lower or watered down. If you're going to pull Gatorade or something like that from an aid station, make sure you're also grabbing water as well, and try to dilute that as much as you possibly can. Because what happens, especially too, if we have, like, a lot of people will put fuel sources into their hydration bottles. And again, we're getting into that really iffy state where we may be dropping way too much carbohydrate into our gut. And then that is going to be really difficult for the body to be able to absorb, and it can just lead to fueling problems and also gut problems down the road. So a couple things to keep in mind there. And then the last thing on hydration that I'm going to say is that after about an hour, particularly for female athletes, it's harder for us to be able to drink water based on your thirst level. It almost gets muted. So one of the things you just want to keep in mind all the time, starting from as soon as you get on that bike and out of the swim, I want you to always be telling yourself, sip, sip, sip. Sip, sip, sip. You're just constantly sipping on water. You're not necessarily trying to get a certain amount in per se, but I just want you to be constantly just sipping on a little bit of water the whole time, because what that's going to do is it's going to help you be able to keep hydration coming in. And also the last thing I'll say on that too, I'm packing this full with all sorts of tips, but try to avoid drinking just plain water, especially when you get into those hot races. Make sure it does have some sort of sodium or some sort of solution with electrolytes to help you be able to balance that out. Because if you're taking in plain water, what you may end up finding is your body tries to balance out its sodium to water ratio, and then you'll just be visiting those aid stations the whole time, and that's to the restrooms, and that's your body trying to get that sodium to water ratio to the right amount. You're just working yourself into dehydration. So just a few tips there to be really careful of as far as that goes. Now, a really quick point for my athletes, my female athletes here that are on the other side, they're not in their reproductive phase anymore, and they're on the menopause side. One thing that I really want you to remember is that carbohydrates actually aren't as king anymore. Your protein is going to be really, really, really important. So something that you can do just in and around your workouts is your pre-workout and your post-workout. You really want to be focusing on getting protein in throughout that whole phase, up that protein to about 40 grams spread throughout. So pre-workout to post-workout, you want to be getting about 40 grams in total. And that's a lot more protein than what most people will have you do. But that's going to be very effective for helping you to keep that muscle integrity, be able to keep that power and all of that. And then as far as the carbohydrates go, I would just start with something that's around anywhere between, for an average woman, anywhere between 50 to 60 grams-ish of carbs per hour if you're going to be doing, 2 to 3 hour long workouts or training sessions or more. Just kind of an average amount there. And then you can adjust that as as you see fit, right? So if you're feeling like towards that 3-hour cycle, you're just draining, that would be a really good time to maybe up those carbs a little bit. And that's going to be very specific to you, of course. So just a place for you to start at least. And then this is why it's so great to just work on this during training, because then you can really dial this in very specifically for you. And then on race day, you don't have to guess anymore. You're just pretty confident in what you've tried in training, and you just know exactly what you want. I have a few more minutes left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about some daily nutrition things that you can be doing to make sure that you're not under fueling and under eating, because that's a very, very common problem for women in particular. And I want to make sure that you are getting the most out of your performance, so that you can, I don't know, do the best you can, right? I want you to be reaching those levels that you know that you can and that you're capable of. So first things first, as far as like what to do for protein, 1 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day is a wide range. But if you are like on average, let's say you're in off season or pre-season, about 1 gram or so per kilogram of body weight to 1.5 is going to be fine. You're not training super hard. You're not doing, too much. You're kind of in resting phase. That's a fine amount. But as soon as you start getting into those, you've got at least 10 plus hours of training or more per week, we're really wanting to get closer to that 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. If you're in the States and you're using pounds, it's going to be about a 1-to-1. If you weigh 140 pounds, it's going to be about 140 grams of protein per day. And that can be in any form. That can be in animal-based or plant-based, whatever it is that works really well for you. Just making sure you're getting enough protein is going to help immensely with recovery, but also with those mitochondria that I mentioned as well. They absolutely have to have protein in order to generate energy, and they just thrive when you actually start eating enough of that for what you're doing. So I hope you try that, because if you're not eating enough protein, I would be really curious to hear how it goes when you start eating a little bit more. And give yourself time. Ease it in, like if you're like, oh my gosh, there's no way I could eat 100 grams of protein per day or more, just try adding in 10 grams of protein each day. So that might be like 1 egg, or maybe just like incorporating a 1/4 cup of beans, or something like that, a little bit more per day or per week. And eventually you'll get there, and it's easier. So don't get overwhelmed with that. Another thing that you want to be doing as well, as far as the carbohydrates per day, this ranges a ton based on the person, but I guarantee you when I say this number and you run the numbers, you're going to be like, I'm not sure that I have the balls to be able to eat that much carbohydrates per day, but it's really important. So the number is to check your body weight, and it's about 7 to 10 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of body weight per day. This is particularly when you're in the middle of that intense training. Okay. That's a lot of carbohydrates when you start to run the numbers, but this could be around 300 grams of carbohydrates or more per day. And for some of you, you're going to be like, whoa, that seems like a ton. But if you focus on getting really good quality complex carbohydrates from things like quinoa, sweet potatoes, any colored potatoes, because the more color, the better, any type of like rices and all of those different types of forms, you will be amazed, especially when you're in the middle of that training phase where you've got 10 plus more hours of training per week. It's going to be a solid amount, but there's a wide range. So I would start maybe on the lower side, see how you do, like maybe 7 grams of carbs per kilogram of body weight per day. And then you can kind of work up from there and then just see what makes you feel the best. And that's the best way to trial and error your daily nutrition for sport. Obviously in the off season, that's going to shift and change a little bit because you're not necessarily training as much, right? The last couple points I'll say, just based on like overall health, is just be aware of under eating in your daily nutrition. So one thing that's average for women is that your baseline of like your resting metabolic rate, like let's say you were in a coma, 1,500 calories per day is if you were in a coma. average. I'm not kidding. There's studies everywhere that you can see this. And if you're not sure, you can always run like a DEXA scan with an RMR breath test that can really give you specifically for you what you need, because you may be a little bit higher than that on the higher metabolism or lower on that if you have kind of a slower metabolism in general. But 1,500 calories per day is like, you're not doing anything. It's not even resting on the couch per day. It's literally like your body has to have that in order for it to just barely function. So then if you're adding all of that training on top of that, and then if you are kind of active in your job per day, it's a lot of calories that you need to be consuming. So just be really careful of that and make sure that you're eating enough so that you're not working yourself into under eating. I think that's a really critical piece. Last thing, eat the rainbow of veggies as much as you possibly can. I know as you get deeper into your training that it's going to be a little bit harder to get as much food and as much of those really dense carbohydrates in if you're eating a ton of vegetables, but it's called balance, right? So throughout like your normal year, what you want to be doing is on average is trying to get in as many colorful fruits and vegetables as possible throughout the day. And then if you get closer to like race day, maybe we're eating a few less of those veggies and trying to get in some more of those really dense starchy carbohydrates. But overall, that's what we're going to try to be doing, is getting as much colorful food in as possible throughout the year on average to balance out some of those really high carbohydrate times, really simple sugar times, on race day, and in your weeks like leading up to some of these bigger races. That's something that you just want to be really aware of, is, you're going to be fueling with some very high carbohydrate fuel sources, and that can be a little bit iffy on the blood sugar side of things. But if you can balance out the rest of that in your daily nutrition and training during the weeks and try to get some more colorful fruits and vegetables, that's going to be a great way to manage some of the gaps that can form from nutrient deficiencies and things like that. So that's pretty much all I had for you today. It was a lot. I packed that with as many things as I could possibly give. Do we have any questions coming through yet, Caroline?
Let me just make sure I'm back online. Yeah, I'm back online. So basically because we were on Facebook and now we're on YouTube, I don't know if people have
that's totally fine.
Got questions ready. We do have a lot of people watching. So if you would like to ask a question, just pop them in the comments under the video on YouTube. Just to expand on a couple of things. So I've seen some studies recently as well about the prevalence of undereating in female athletes. Well, I mean, females in general, but female athletes particularly. These studies were done on because I think from what I've seen over the course of kind of my coaching and athletic career, it's definitely much more of a problem than we think it is. What are some of the symptoms that you've seen with people? Like how, if I was just trundling along eating the kind of same amount that I always eat, and I didn't know that I was under eating, what would be some of the things that I would experience?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you two sides of that. So one, if it gets really bad and if it's been going on for like a long time, losing your period or things like that would be something to be very, very aware of. Like that's the biggest one. If you lose your period, we have some serious problems. And the thing that I want to be like a warning sign is like, if you start even getting spotting, if something with your hormones starts to get a little bit wonky, like irregular periods, anything like that, pay attention. Because the problem is when you get to that point of where you lose your period, we have to stop training. We have to take you out of everything. We have to wait for your body to readjust. It's a process. So I could give one thing to like anybody at any age of like female athletes that are going to be training, like avoid that as much as possible, because once you get to that place, like I work with that a lot, and it's just the hardest thing, because I have to be the one that's like, I'm really sorry, but in order for us to get you to be able to perform really, really, really well, like better than you ever have, we've got to get your period back. And that's going to be a process. Yeah.
And I think there is some of, I hope not anymore, but certainly in the past, there was some of like almost a kind of acceptance of women, like, oh, if I'm training really hard for an event, I lose my period for a few months, that's okay,
It's
because I'm
fine.
training really hard.
No.
And actually what you're doing is really
No.
undermining your performance. Exactly.
Yes.
And giving
Yeah.
yourself long-term
Potential
problems. Yeah, exactly. So
yeah.
okay,
The other
so
thing I'll
that's
say
really
on
good
that, like
advice.
little things are going to be like fatigue. Like if you get to like the middle of the week and you're just like, oh my gosh, all I want to do is like lay on the couch, eat more food. Eat more food.
Yeah.
And then the other thing too on that is like if you're starting to get like aches and pains, like let's say you're getting to about an hour into your workout and like, oh, your glutes are starting to, you get that like achy pain in your hip joint. Eat more food, fuel more, eat more food. And a lot of the times that will just clear up a lot of those like weird pain sort of things. So those are two things you can look out for. Yeah.
And I think your advice on eating around your cycle is really great. Can you just, because I think sometimes it's quite hard for people to take it all in when you're talking, and I just think that's really it's a really key point, and something I just want to sort of go back to. And you were talking about during phase 1 how you need slightly less carbs per body weight of, and then in phase 2 you need slightly more. So basically, as people are in phase 2 of their cycle, so towards the end of the cycle, that's the point at which they start to need to eat more carbohydrates, because the body is not taking in as much.
Yeah. So actually, that's a great question. Thank you for clarifying. So first off, that only is around your training. So in your day-to-day, like you're still going to stick to that like protein amount that I was talking about, that like 1 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, and that 7 to 10-ish grams of carbs per kilogram of body weight per day. That all stays the same. But what changes is your fueling. So like, let's say hour plus run or an hour plus bike, you're actually going to want to make sure you're getting in more carbohydrates. So that 0.45-ish times your weight in pounds, that's in that fueling. Like you want to but otherwise carbohydrates, protein, pretty much all stays the same throughout the day, no matter what.
So it's more to do with, so it's more to do with how your body uses energy for your training during the different phases of your cycle.
Correct.
And actually during that second phase of your cycle, it's finding it more difficult to train without an actual fuel source that you're eating, essentially.
Yes. And the thing here is what we're trying to avoid is you getting to that second to the third to fourth week before your cycle and feeling that just like feeling like your body's just like you're wondering like what the heck just happened to me, because like last week I was like PRing all my stuff and then this week I just feel like junk, like I'm so slow. It's not that you're not making progress. It's that what's happening literally with your body right now is there are things that are changing within that cycle. So the thing you want to focus on is leveraging that nutrition so that you have a little bit more energy, so that during that time you can actually at least get close to hitting those performance markers you're looking for. And then you can usually perform at more or less where you're capable of. But just keeping in mind that especially in those days right before your period, like 2 to 3, 4 days before, it's common to not feel on point.
And are there some other things girls can do in that phase to offset those symptoms? Supplements and things?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is to make sure that you're eating enough carbohydrates, especially if you're racing like really close to your period, like make sure you're getting in a lot of that. But then the second thing is if you get like cramps or if you get like some kind of weird, icky, kind of weird symptoms, which I'm like, I have battled my share of those things. Omega-3s, your fish oils are going to be really awesome for that. So your anti-inflammatories, fish oils in particular though, because your omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, they actually have the capability to turn off the inflammatory process. So your NSAIDs like Advil, stuff like that, your even your turmeric, stuff like that, they don't actually turn off inflammation. They kind of cover it up in a sense. Like, I'm not saying turmeric's bad. Turmeric has many, many, many great benefits. However, it doesn't exactly work the same. So fish oil can be a very effective way, getting in more omega-3s at helping your body be able to turn off that inflammation, and to balance out some of those omega-6s that we get from some processed foods and things like that too. So that's one, things like that.
Sorry for people that like don't want to eat fish oil. What are some other omega-3 sources? Seeds
they have
and
they have so like flax seeds are going to be pretty good. Walnuts as well are pretty high in omega-3s on that plant-based side. They have some others coming out though. It's just looking for like a plant-based fish or plant-based omega-3 source is going to be good.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
And I will say too, on that fish oil quality side, like, please make sure you're getting a good quality one. Like, don't waste your money, don't waste your time, get a very, very good quality one, because you're just working against yourself if you're not.
You're just not getting, Okay, we've got a couple more minutes. I just want to like briefly touch on something you talked about regarding XTRI. So certainly for me, the XTRIs that I've done have been like the longest triathlon days out I've ever done.
They're intense.
They're 14 however many hours.
Oh, I know.
And for some people a lot more, a lot more. And one of the things that people struggle with sometimes is just getting bored of what they're eating. Is like how you refer to it. Basically, your taste goes. You don't want sugar. You don't want things like that.
Yes.
And one of the mistakes I've seen people make in XTRI is they try to just go for too much variety. They're like, well, I can have anything because I've got a car next to me, so I'll pack it full of pizza and jelly babies and whatever.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, because you have a support car in XTRI. Yeah. So here's what I would suggest. So quick tips here, just before we're done. The thing that I would do in practice for sure is make sure that whatever fuel source you want to use, you practice with as much as possible, so you're really used to it. The second thing is try to stay as consistent as you possibly can. As soon as you get to that palate fatigue is a good way to say it. Like, you just I cannot eat another salted potato to save my life. At that point, you want to make sure that you are, so there's a couple things you can do. Number one is you can switch to gels or some type of like very quick fuel source if you'd like to try to like kind of take a break for a bit. The other thing you can do too is have like 2 or 3 different options, not a million different options, just a couple. So, maybe bring some PB&Js, maybe bring some, salted potatoes, maybe bring some whole food type bars that you've practiced with. And then you can kind of go from there. Or I really like the honey stinger waffles. Those are a favorite of mine because I can cut them in half. And I know if I eat a half each hour, I get close with some of the other things that I eat. So I have a few options, but not like a million different kinds of options. And I think that can be helpful for just avoiding that palate fatigue. But then as soon as you get to that point where you're like, I just literally can't eat any more food, that's a really good time to switch to gels or some things like that just might be faster fuel and easier to digest towards the end.
Okay. Last one quickly.
Okay.
I know you talked a little bit about Monster Extra, and you also talked about the kind of running for the Portaloo sort of symptom that a lot of people will suffer with on intense and long endurance races. What is your top tip for handling that in the moment? So if that does happen to you, you start to feel those symptoms of having a leaky gut, what is the kind of things you can do to fix that during a race?
This is okay. So
I know it's a whole can of worms.
All of my athletes will have either branched chain amino acids, or they'll have L-glutamine mixed into some of their bottles. L-glutamine is a amino acid that, as it passes through the GI tract, it helps to heal that leaky gut. So that's one. quick tip. Branched chain amino acids is another one. If you have those every 90 minutes or so ish, that's going to be really effective at keeping that leaky gut down. And you can also start taking them if you start kind of getting those symptoms. And the last bit on that is you may just want to focus, like if at any time your gut gets like gurgly, burpy, anything like that, the first thing you want to do is just focus on hydration. So many people think it's all about fueling and then they kind of like forget their hydration. Sip on water, sip your hydration, just let that all settle so that it can actually drop into your small intestine, and then you can start fueling again. So those are just a couple of tips that you can do if things start to get really wonky with your gut. Focus on hydration.
Great. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Kirsten.
Thanks for having me. Oh,
an absolute just download of information. I'm so glad we recorded it. I'm glad it's going to be available for people.
I have something really quick for everybody who's watching. If you want, you can go to drkirsten.com/finishstrong and you can kind of dial in. I have a free PDF guide for you that you can kind of go through each of these sections and just make sure that you've got that all like locked in. And if there's anything going on with your health, you can check that out there too. So there you go.
Thank you.
I'm done. I'm done.
Dr. K is an absolute wealth of information. Follow her on Instagram. She has some great posts and great live talks and podcasts and all sorts. So a real mine of knowledge there for everybody. So thank you so much for joining us.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Okay, hopefully we have Lydia. Okay, I'm just going to do a quick intro if you're up and ready.
Yeah.
All right, so you probably have seen if you've been following on the Facebook group. So Lydia, you're in Cheltenham today?
Yeah, that's correct, in Cheltenham.
Based in Cheltenham, you can see from her little banner behind her. She's running a brand called Phoenix Evolution, and she's talking to us today in her capacity as a cycling expert and founder of Phoenix Evolution, which is bike fitting and cycling coaching. But she's also a professional athlete, and she has a background in cycling. And I believe you still even enjoy racing cross country and mountain bikes at a sort of elite level. So you've got all the experience. And you're going to talk to us a little bit about some of the ways that we can dial in our bike fitting and bike choices of equipment for XTRI.
Yes, I am indeed. Yeah, thanks for that intro. No I think, dabble in mountain biking is probably fair to say as such. I wouldn't say it was necessarily very successful, but it was good fun, and that's what we always want to have on our bikes. Exactly, right? That's why we ride bikes, because they're fun in the first place. So so like Caroline said, I'm going to run through a few areas to consider with like how to think about your bike setup, the approach you take, and I'll run you through the philosophy so that I take, called the Phoenix Radar. So anyone who comes in for a bike fit with me, these are the key areas that we start to look at to make sure we're taking an actually individualized solution. And that was one of the reasons why I started Phoenix, because I wanted to help people to get the right support with their bikes that put them at the heart of that approach. But also, like I hopefully will be able to convey today, so that they would go away with knowledge and understanding of the changes that we've made and the rationale behind them. And that's why I included evolution in the name, because coming in for a bike fit isn't just one moment in time. It is a process that's totally ongoing or evolving, and you need to be able to have the knowledge to be able to go and continue that yourself. So it's a really, really two-way process. And one thing that I love so far about it is the number of people that come back to me and like ask questions, and they've said talked about the changes they've made. So feel free after this to ask any questions, or if there's any way I can help and support you, just let me know. So what I'll do first is I'll introduce you to the Phoenix Radar, and this has 4 key areas. So it's helping someone when they come in to find the balance between sustainability and comfort, aerodynamics, power and efficiency, and equipment and handling. So just to go into a little bit more detail about those 4 areas. So what does sustainability and comfort really mean? Well, this is talking about for the duration of the events that you're going to be racing or attending, are you actually able to hold the position on the bike? So the XTRI is going to be a long day out. So we need to make sure that you're actually comfortable whilst doing that. So there's no point in setting your bike up, so depending on whether it's road bike or TT bike, with the view that you're going to, like someone would for a 10-mile time trial, basically. So we need to consider the actual event you're training for and racing, and how we can make sure that that position is going to be sustainable for you as an individual. So there'll be aspects of looking at your biomechanics and your physiological limitations. So some people, when they come in, we always go through a bit of a flexibility test, just looking at that sort of hip mobility they have, and the pelvic and spinal flexion as well. Some people are super flexible and bendy. They can touch their toes, no problem at all. They can put their palms flat on the floor. That's ace. Some people can't even reach their toes. So we need to make sure that that is individualized. There's no point in trying to put someone in an aggressive position that they can't sustain, or suddenly they look aero for the 2 seconds when they see the photographer, and then you see them a few minutes up the road and they're stretching their back out and shaking their neck, and negated any benefit of that. So yeah, sustainability is the first area, and making sure that is also comfortable for you. I'll come on to comfort because that's quite an interesting one and very, very perceptive. The second point is around aerodynamics. So on the whole, most bikes are designed to be aero in some way, shape or form. And ultimately we jump on them, and we are the biggest blockers for the bikes to be able to achieve their aerodynamic potential. So how can we ensure that our position complements the design of the bike? Because we don't want to totally negate aero, because actually it's quite good to have that, because essentially the more aerodynamic we are, the less work we have to do. So when we talk about aerodynamics, we relate this back to, you might have heard a lot of chat about how low's your CDA. So that's the coefficient of aerodynamic drag. And essentially by lowering your CDA, you might be able to attain greater speeds for the same power input, but more efficiently, essentially. But we also don't want to get distracted by this about being the ultimate. When we look at CDA, one of the areas, the biggest part is the frontal area. So that's going to be shoulders. So you see people get really, really narrow, really tight, and they'll say they've got a really, really small CDA. So lowering the head, narrowing the arms and lowering the shoulders, in theory, might be faster when you're looking at the sort of CDA and the aerodynamic benefits. But actually, if this is impacting your ability to generate power over a long period of time, it's not probably really worth the trade-off. So also getting lower starts to close up that hip angle. So we're not just thinking about aerodynamics in the context of just a bike leg, we're thinking about this in the context of a whole triathlon. So there's no point in being really low, really aero and small, if you then get off and try to run and your hip flexors are in absolute pieces, you're trying to stretch with your back, and you'll find your run is really, really hindered because you've tried to get into a really aero position. So it's looking at this with a really sensible approach, because we don't want to, if we can make aerodynamic gains, and that's going to increase our ability to be more efficient on the bike, then yeah, let's go for them. But let's also make sure that we're being smart with how we're doing this. So simple little things like, where do you carry your bottles? So between the arms, behind the saddle, two of the most aero efficient places. So it's looking at the smart ways like that we can improve your aerodynamics whilst complementing your overall position based on your biomechanics. So the next piece is around efficiency and power. So how can your position help you to cycle as efficiently as possible whilst transferring as much power? So I think we kind of tend to forget that there's a lot of revolutions of pedal strokes going on. We need to make sure everyone we take is minimizing the amount of energy expenditure. We're also transferring as much power. So that shoe to cleat interaction is incredibly key with being able to do that, and also the overall position you're in. So yeah, thinking about how you can be efficient, and even coming down to not just your position, but how you as an individual are riding. So it's really interesting when I get onto this point in the bike fitting process with someone talking around efficiency. We run through a video analysis They have a mirror right in front of them as well. So you can then see how someone goes through the process thinking, actually, I can see there's loads of lateral movement going on and I'm all over the place on the bike. And you're thinking, yeah, and that's essentially a power loss, an efficiency loss. So it's thinking about not only how your position can increase your level of efficiency, but how that could complement you for how you ride as well. And are you being as efficient as possible? Are you spiking all over the place? How are you transferring that power? So there's a lot in terms of the pedaling dynamics that comes into that equation as well. The last area we start to look at is the equipment and handling. So I'll come on to a few more specifics around this later on, but this is an area that's often overlooked but can make a massive difference to how your overall ride and race experience is. So this is things like equipment choices around your helmet, your shoes, even like your socks, considering your hydration and storage setup, and actually getting these things on like points can help to reassure you and increase your level of, actually, do you know what? Yep, I know those things are sorted. I'm going to feel confident going into this event. I know that I've got the spares. Everything is like good to go. I've controlled absolutely everything that I possibly can. Yeah, it just increases your levels of confidence. Similarly, with certain equipment choices can help with how you feel around handling as well. So when you look at the road bike or TT bike setup, actually just changing armrests to something a little bit more high-sided, just so you feel secure and like you can really plant yourself and you're at one with the bike, just that increased level of confidence can make a massive difference to how you feel during that whole race experience. So those are the key 4 areas I look at. So just to summarize, that's the balance between sustainability and comfort, aerodynamics, efficiency and power, and equipment and handling. So that's all like quite broad. So onto some more specifics now. So when you're looking to set up your bike, there are what I call the 3 key touch points. So this is the interaction between the saddle, the handlebars, including the stem, and shoes as well. So whenever I buy a new bike, which I have tried to decrease the frequency of, I think decreasing, yet it seems to have increased. Sell 2 and buy 2 more, but it nets off, right? N+1. I call it work is just cross-checking that I'm doing my research and due diligence. So I always, whenever I buy a new bike, I always look at the key touch points and assume that I'm going to probably have to change them. So manufacturers have to make assumptions, and these assumptions are based on averages. So I know as an individual, I've the unfortunate way around that I've got shorter legs and a longer body. Some people have got longer legs and shorter bodies. This means that certain areas you might have to adjust, i.e. stem length, to make sure that the bike's set up for you in the right way. So yeah, manufacturers, they do have to make assumptions. So when you're considering your bike, the 3 areas you should review: your saddle, handlebars, stems, and also shoes. You also got to think about you and how you feel on a bike. And I love this part of the process of the bike fitting, because someone walks in and you're like, so what areas of discomfort are you struggling with? That, oh yeah, I get this pain in my right hand knee. Then you start to work it through from literally head down to toes. So you go, all right, do you get any pain in your neck? And they're like, oh yeah, no, I do get pain in my neck. And it's like, and how do your shoulders feel? Oh yeah, after about an hour, they start to get tense. And then it's, oh, and I get numbness in my hands. So this is really important, and something that you can all do yourselves is go through when you're on your bike during the ride, at any point in time, and even after, and that's an important point, assess yourself, right, how do I feel? Work it down through your head, through to your neck, down through to the arms, hands, like the back, lower back in particular, glutes, all the way down to toes. Are you getting numb feet? And then start to pick up on, right, how long into a ride is it that I've started to experience this? Does this stop as soon as the ride ends? Can I feel the next day? Because the more in tune you are with this now, ahead of whilst you're preparing for your races, you can start to resolve this so that on race day, you can be as confident as you can. Like, there's always going to be something on race day when you're putting your body through those extreme situations, that always crops up that you can't foresee as such. But at least you know that you've tried to resolve all of these issues that might be impacting your levels of comfort and the experience you're getting on a bike. So when I talk about comfort as well, this is another thing. Lots of people come in and they think they're quite comfortable. Always question, could it be more comfortable? And I know that people's perceptions of comfort are really different. So like the chair I'm sitting on right now, I might find really comfortable. Someone else might jump on it and find it absolutely horrific. So always think about, actually, this might be comfortable, and don't be afraid to try new things, because could it be more comfortable? It might not be, but at least you know what the counterfactual is, and that you know your setup is as comfortable as it possibly can be. So just a bit of an overview then on the 3 key touch points. So always start with the saddle. And I know saddles are always a massively contentious issue. Like, some people find them no problem at all. Other people really, really struggle with saddle sores, and to the point where I've had people come in and they've been struggling so much that they just want to stop cycling, which is one of the saddest things ever. And it's hard to choose the right saddle as such, and this does come down to ultimately a lot of trial and error and personal preference, and thinking about, right, what works for you as an individual. And just because your mate said, oh, this saddle's ace, it might not be the worst one for you. So it can be a bit of a, I say pain in the ass, but just trying to find the right one. But it's worth getting it right. And one thing with saddles as well, so you might think, oh, do you know what, that's going to be really expensive just to try a lot of saddles. So when you look at the cost of a saddle, don't assume just because it's always is expensive, it's necessarily going to be better. So often the cost is increased in a saddle due to the material, so such as carbon rails. So it's worth, and lots of people buy things secondhand, so it's worth investing the time to get this right. So that's the choice of the saddle. The next piece is around your saddle, so position. And this is made up of 2 areas. So this is saddle height as well as fore and aft. And so when you're thinking about height, you're looking at the overall knee extension you have. So typically, and I say this very, this is a range as such, you look for about 100 to 145 degrees. And I don't work to numbers as such. I use analysis tools to help and understand the ranges that someone might be suitable within. But this is why it's also a massively a 2-way process, is because it's finding out actually how does that individual feel on the bike. And this is why it's important to know someone's degree of flexibility, i.e. through their hamstrings, because that's going to have an impact on their actual extension range. So if you've got your saddle too high or too low, you can often tell. So if there's a lot of movement, especially through the hips, so that can indicate both ways. So then you start to go and roll, how does it feel? So are you feeling that through the quads or the glutes you're struggling to generate power? That might indicate that your saddle height is too low. If it's too high, what you can often see and even sometimes feel is that there's an overreaching and almost a slipping on the pedal as you're trying to get towards that downward stroke, which then results in a loss of power as well. One other area to talk about on saddle height is when you're setting up your bike ready for race day, make sure you try out your tri-suits ahead of this as well, because the chamois height difference in a tri-suit versus cycling shorts can be a couple of millimeters, which a couple of mil doesn't necessarily sound a lot, but when someone comes in for a bike fit, I only work in increments of 3 to 5 mil at a time. And just making those small adjustments, someone says, oh, I'm not going to feel that, not going to feel that, it makes a difference. So trust me, try out your tri-suit, cross-check your saddle height with that on ahead of race day, and you might find that that makes a massive difference. When you're looking at fore and aft, so this is essentially the position of the saddle along the rails. This is your saddle setback. This determines the position of your knee. So if you've got your saddle too far back, you might find it harder to generate power. Too far forward, this can result in the potential for knee problems due to enforced creases on the kneecap. Also think about where you're sitting on the saddle and where you want to be. You see people shuffle around a lot, they're moving forwards and backwards, their saddle's not supporting them quite right. So don't be afraid to make the adjustments of fore and aft, so the position along the rails, to your saddle, just to refine it and see how that feels. If you get your saddle height right and your fore and aft right, that can help with that overall stability and the balance. And this is where you're going to be taking a lot of sort of the mass distribution is going to be through the saddle, like dependent on your setup, but on the whole on the road bike. The other thing to consider as well is your handlebars. So this is often quite overlooked. So position. So there's can be lots of different elements of the position. So the first thing I ask is, can you reach your levers? Are your hands like nestled into the hoods? Are your arms relaxed or are they locked out? Can you use the drops? So it's quite common to actually find that a lot of people come in and they're like, actually, I can't really reach my brake levers. So when you think about that overall confidence you have when you're out on the bike, you want to be able to reach those brake levers and not have to essentially wrap your fingers around to reach those. So this is a really simple adjustment that you can make. So you can actually loosen off and move the brake levers around on the handlebars. Equally, a lot of the levers these days, you can now wind in closer towards you. So you can actually increase that, like the level of dexterity you've got towards the levers. So thinking about actually, that's a real simple, quick change. Also, handlebar width. So typically you find that handlebars on the road bikes are coming in like 42 centimeters. Well, you probably, like, especially for women, you might want a 36 or a 38 centimeter. Ultimately, when you look at yourself on the bike, are your shoulders in line with the hoods? That's the kind of rule of thumb measurement that you're looking for. So by having the right handlebars in terms of their width, means in terms of pressure, that's going to be reduced. So if you find that your handlebars are too wide, you're almost displacing your hands and you find that people might have pressure through the wrists. So that's a key area to consider. So go away, measure your handlebars, have a look at how you from the frontal view are on your bike. Whether they're too wide, you might be able to see that immediately. Also consider, so I mentioned about one of the key areas that I always look to change on a bike, most likely is going to be the stem length. So again, think about whether you feel like you're reaching, this is once you've got your saddle position right, are you still reaching too far forwards? Are you overstretching? Or do you even feel like you're cramped up? So adjusting the length just by like 10 mil can make a massive difference, that overall ride position. And again, this comes down to if you've got that touch point right on the handlebars, that's going to massively impact how you feel on the bike in terms of that handling and the level of confidence you will experience throughout the duration of the race, whether you're climbing or descending or on the flats as well. You can also adjust the height of your handlebars. Really, really simple adjustment just through the spaces on the headset. So again, this can have a positive impact on just relaxing the elbows and the overall position. And there is the old adage in cycling of get that front end as low as possible. And you might have heard of slam stems as well. Honestly, don't be afraid to bring those spaces in the handlebar height upwards and make sure that you're able to relax that position nicely. So again, you might be thinking about road bike or TT bike. And one of the key areas to think about here, well, we've seen that the Taylor Nib, Flora Duffy and Gustav Eden all done all right on road bikes. And again, this might increase your level of comfort. So think about the handling that you get when you're descending. And again, just if you're comfortable on your bike, don't underestimate how much additional fatigue that could reduce being created just through feeling at one with it. You also got to think about if you are setting your road bike up with aero bars, again, you might want to consider your saddle choice. So making a little bit more specific around like the TT type due to the rotation through like the pelvis, the hip angle and the overall comfort. We've set up some brilliant road bike setups and we have put the ISM Atmos on, and again, saddle choice has to be a personal preference, but that TT sort of saddle does work really well if you are then going to be rotating and on the aero bars. Also think about your armrest choice. And when you buy extensions, this is another area that they often skimp on, and just changing to something a little bit more high-sided that's going to support you further through the forearm and give you that stability might help with that overall level of comfort. And again, this doesn't need to be an expensive change. So like, for example, the Profile Design Race Cut armrests, £35, but one of the best solutions ever. So I would have them on my bike, but I can't work out a way to get them to fit with the between the arms mount that I have. So yeah, really, really simple. You don't need to spend 120 quid on carbon armrests. I mean, you can, it's nice weight saving, but equally, just a £35 pair of Profile armrests can make a massive difference to that overall experience you have. So it's quite simple just to make that change yourself. So again, don't just assume that it's going to be the best thing that comes with any extensions you buy. Be happy to make those changes and try a few different options out. So I've got a few minutes left. So there's quite a load of other areas we could go into for like overall optimization piece. But I think some of the key areas for me is around like the simple equipment choices you can make. So helmets, again, what's comfortable, try out what works for you. I'm recently looking at like the position I've had on my bike. I've been reviewing my helmet choice. Make sure it does complement your overall position, and again, keep it really simple. So I race in sunglasses instead of a visor because I know that increases my level of comfort. Like through wind tunnel testing, it's negligible whether there's probably a few watts difference, but for me, that trade-off is more than well worth it for that overall comfort that I get. And again, hydration systems. Think about, you've got the support vehicles, what are you going to be able to easily grab? So if you can keep it to a bottle holder, so XLab do a brilliant, it's called the XLab torpedo mount. So you can mount this in between your extensions. So again, one of the most area efficient places, bottle between the arms. Really simple. You can then switch out a bottle with another bottle and it's done. No like topping up of hydration systems and faffing around with potentially the straws in the face, etc. One of the other things is looking at the choice around where your actual tubeless wheel set, whether you go for a tubeless wheel set or whether you stick to like inner tubes. So when you think about your overall ride experience and comfort, you might want to switch to a wheel set that allows you to improve that. So tubeless has always been seen as something that is scary, and you're sort of uncertain about it. Don't be afraid of the tech. That's probably my biggest tip, is the advantages of tubeless. So I've been riding tubeless for absolute years now. Every single bike, so my TT bike, gravel bike, mountain bike is set up running tubeless. So there's a lot of like people are worried about it, saying, oh, what if I get a puncture? I know how to fix it. Either way, know your kit. It's not going to be scary, I promise you. So all you need to do, so in most instances, the sealant will coagulate and your puncture will probably be sorted. If it doesn't, it's pretty unlucky. However, there's lots of backup options around this. So you can use, it's called a Dynaplug, really, really simple. You just stab it in, little bit of rubber, take it out, cut it away, and that probably will sort most of your problems out. Recently, I've been running tire inserts. So these are like almost like an inner tube, but they're like a foam in a tube. And they're an added layer of protection. They keep the conformity of the tire as well. So it means you can roll back in. I think they say about 30 to 50 kilometers. So when you've been training for an event for so long, you want to make sure you've controlled absolutely every controllable to get to that finish line. So this is an area that at least you can know that you've got that added layer of protection with a tire insert and a tubeless setup. The other good, like massive positive of the tubeless setup is you're not going to get a pinch flat. It's also safety as well, and this is the big one for me. If you're out on the road, and I know some of the road surfaces are going to be quite sketchy on some of these XTRI events, you're going along and you're descending, you don't get the flash bang like puncture that you would have in tube that you do with tubeless. It's a slow, steady release. And you're also going to know about it because you'll have the visible indicator of the sealant as well. So that's a massive pro for me for why I choose a tubeless setup over running with and in a tube. So it's the puncture resistance and the reliability. It's also the increase in comfort as well. So you can run a lower PSI, which takes that buzz out the road, which, let's face it, anything to reduce any more vibrations going through the shoulders, the arms, and the overall body. When you're having a really, really long day out, you want to take it. So I only run like 50, 55 PSI with an insert on mine. And it varies from person to person and course to course, but that's also with a 28mm tyre. So thinking about those optimization choices, as well as your bike position, right, what's the equipment that I'm investing in that I can make sure is going to help add up to increased levels of comfort to give me the absolute best experience possible? So in summary, there's loads more I could go into on this. I mean, I know Caroline wanted to chat about crank length, you can talk about wheel sets. I mean, the list is absolutely possibly endless with that. And like what spares you can carry, so much stuff. But in summary, the key points, just keep it simple. Look at what works for you as an individual. Don't be afraid to try stuff and try out other equipment choices, how you position your bike, and give it time, and be patient with that adjusting. Find out your balance between sustainability and comfort, aerodynamics, power and efficiency, and look at your equipment and how that can impact your overall handling and experience. So yes, that's kind of lots of a big overview of bikes.
All right, brilliant. Thanks, Lydia, for that. That's been, yeah, a lot of information for people. Again, I'm glad we've recorded that so people can go back and kind of dip into some of the things you've said there. Some really interesting points about bike choice. I think one of the key takeaways that I got there really is just that people shouldn't be afraid to play around with their bike position and their bike choices, like equipment choices. I think sometimes people are scared to put their seat up or down, or move their, change the stem length on the handlebars, or move the saddle backwards or forwards, because they think they're going to somehow like mess things up. And actually, like you said, if you're out riding and you get, I don't know, knee pain or something like that, just try moving things about, especially neck pain as well, that kind of stuff. Sometimes there are just really simple things you can do with your bike position just to sort that out.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing I would say is some of the changes are expensive.
Yeah.
So for example, crank length, sometimes buying a different stem, buying a different set of like a handlebar setup, different like width of handlebars, those kind of things. So if so basically get expert advice before you start going down the road of spending a lot of money on these things.
Yes, no, totally agree.
I will also back you up massively on the tubeless side of things. I also like run tubeless on everything, and like just can't imagine riding tubes now.
With an inner tube. No, someone asked me to change an inner tube the other day, and I had to rethink about how to do it.
No, it's not so much that, it's just the comfort for me.
It's the peace of mind that you get.
The peace of mind and the comfort, and especially like you said, a lot of the courses, not a lot of them, but quite often on XTRI course, there will be sections of the road where it's sketchy, it's dodgy surface, it might be even a bit gravelly, and yeah, just having that peace of mind, but also the comfort over that sort of terrain when you're not riding as high PSI. I mean, like you, I ride a really low PSI, and it's as fast, then it just means you can bounce over that kind of surface without getting rattled to death. So good stuff. Okay, well, we're going to have to move on to Sammy. I'm sure that people will have questions for you, but you're part of the group on Facebook, so people can ask you questions there. How else can they get in touch with you?
Just pop me a message through Phoenix Evolution. It's on Facebook and Instagram. And I'll happily answer any questions that anyone has, no problem at all.
Great. And what's your next race?
Volcano Tri which is going to be really exciting.
So
As
that's
Lucy Charles
Lanzarote
in Club
70. No,
Lanzarote.
it's not 70.3. It's like a standard distance.
It's Olympic distance, yeah. Lucy Charles is racing, so I've got to go back and defend my title at Volcano Tri against the current world ranked #1. So what a way to start off the 2022 season. I know. Awesome.
Brilliant. But I know you'll be embracing that challenge.
I can't wait. I'm buzzing.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay, well, good luck with that. We look forward to hearing about how it goes, and we'll hopefully see you lining up in an XTRI at some point in the next few years.
Yes.
You
Yes.
never
So it
know.
looks quite, yes. Yeah, no, that'd be exciting. You never know.
Cool.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Thank you. Thanks, Lydia.
Cheers.
Right, I think we've got Sammy on here. Hi, Sammy.
There we go.
Hi, you're speaking to us from North Carolina.
I am from Wilmington, North Carolina, and that was so much good information. I hope that I can bring something to everybody here. And I'm just like, I'm not a pro. I'm just like,
I'm going to do a quick
watching.
intro to you in a second, Sammy. What sort of time of day is it with you?
It's about 2:15 in the afternoon.
Okay, so you're sort of halfway through the day.
Yeah. We are halfway through. There's still a lot of day left to cover.
Cool. So so coming at us from North Carolina, Sammy is a USAT Tri coach, but more importantly, she's part of the XTRI coaching network. You're an experienced, not only athlete in XTRI. I can see you've got your Swedman. Is it Swedman I can see on there on that top?
It is.
Very nice. But you're also an XTRI coach. You coached a lot of athletes to success in various different races all over the world. And you're going to talk to us a little bit about training for an XTRI in the context of everyday life and I guess a busy lifestyle.
A very busy lifestyle. And
do you want me to share your presentation?
Sure, if you can.
Yeah.
If not, we can just talk a little bit. But I put some slides up here for everybody to.
Okay, how's that?
Oh, that's perfect. That's great. So I just to reiterate what some of the good information we had is interesting. I also say food in your pocket and hydration in your bottle, and borrowed that from Stacy Sims also. And I do tell my athletes when they come to me and, hey coach, what can I do to get faster on the bike? Go get a bike fit. So that's the first thing, go get a bike fit. So some great information there. But what I wanted to talk about today is just that, you know, I'm one of y'all. I fell in love with the sport, and then I fell in love with XTRI, and I wanted to talk about why training is for you, why you should not be scared of it. There's so many different ways to do it, and it can be done in the context of a busy life. So the second slide here just shows you a little bit about myself and what I do and how do I manage to fit all this in. Let's see if we can switch, Caroline. Oh, there we go. So this just tells you a little bit about me. I'm also a veterinarian. I'm starting a canine rehabilitation acupuncture practice and transitioning out of GP. I'm a coach, have an active coaching business, have had for 12 years in the XTRI coaching network. I have 6 dogs. I love to race myself. I am coach of the Oakland Tri Club. I'm race director for Ironman. So my list is long, just like everybody else's is, and I love to race XTRIs and love it. So, you know, the question is, you know, how do you fit it in? And I want to make this so everybody can fit it in. So we're going to cover a couple concepts here of basically what it takes to train for an XTRI, which if everybody on this call has done one, you may have a good idea. If you haven't, then it's meant to just kind of break it down to some top 5 concepts to think about. And then we're going to break down some ways to make it happen in the context of your life. So the first thing that I always want to talk about when you're going to pick one of these XTRIs, and the next slide talks a little bit about it, is finding your why. And why do you want to do this? Do you want to do this just because it's something that, because you have a friend that's going to do it? Do you want to do it because it's going to challenge you? It's going to get you out there training with friends, especially after the 2 years that, you know, we've been through here. Sometimes just getting outside and connecting with others and building the community within the sport. But a lot of times the why for so many athletes is more than just a race. And while we may choose a race, it continues on longer for that. So that is imagining your purpose and why you want to pick this up. It'll also help remind you to get excited for what's coming. So when you get into the grind of a schedule and what you have to do, when you can think about your why, that's going to get you out the door. It will also help continue, like I said, more than just one race. It may become a lifestyle. And that is often my goal for all of my athletes that I coach. And in just building the community, building this into your life, building this as a lifestyle so that you can continue to do it, you know, on down the road. So finding your why is often key. And as a coach, and having coached, you know, many people all over the world, that will come back to them at times when they're just like, Coach, look at this schedule that we put together. Well, here's what you want to do. So let's go out and make it happen. So when you're going to look at picking an XTRI, which is definitely different than just other long course racing, although long course racing in general, you know, is tough in the context of an everyday life. What do we have to consider? So on the next slide, 5 key concepts of what we want to talk about for XTRI training, and how to work it in. This slide right here, just for context, is the picture of me finishing Iceland Extreme. I don't think I could have put on any more clothes than I had on in that picture, and you can see what the weather looked like behind us. But one is consistency of training. Consistency, and that doesn't even have to be a lot of volume. And I tell that to my athletes all the time. It is a consistent work that you do that will get you to where you want to go. If you have 30 minutes a day, then that's what we're going to do. Now, it's true for a lot of these long course races, we have to do more than that, you know, on some of the weekends. But if it looks daunting and you're having trouble getting out the door, break it up and just try and get out for, you know, 30 minutes. But consistency is everything. Discipline. Going back to, we talked about our why. Our why is our motivation, but our discipline is our everyday habits. And it is a discipline that you are building that will get you out the door. That motivation is only going to get you so far, but you have to build the habits and the discipline to make things happen. And I equate it and always chuckle. It's kind of like making your bed in the morning, right? You get in the habit of making your bed, then you've accomplished one thing and you're ready to go on to the next. But the discipline is one thing that's really key for XTRI training. 3 is strength again. And I love to use the word durability for my athletes. And if we could think of one thing in regard to context, that as strong as you can make yourself and as durable as you can build your body, that's going to go a long way. So we talk a lot about, you know, the words of fatigue resistance, power endurance, and throw those and put those words out there. But really, if you can remember strength, durability, and how we're going to build that is key. Recovery, because in the context of all this training, we have to build in recovery. I'm often known as the extras coach to a lot of my athletes, and I'll say, you know, sleep after, you know, short workout, making yourself strong. Sleep is key. Hydration. I'm so happy to hear about fueling and caloric intake. That will take you further than any one set workout that you hear about people doing in regards to volume. And then, of course, for all of us, is managing stress. Everything is in a bucket. You have one big bucket. And if you have dogs to worry about, and you have a job, and you have a family, and you have their high school kids have SATs, at least over here, in the States and whatever else. That is all filling up your bucket. And then you're going to try and put a training day on top of that. Your bucket may overflow. So finding ways to manage stress, and even if that means working in a yoga workout, a Pilates, something that will also pay huge dividends. And then the other key concept is know your course and prepare for anything. So on the next slide, knowing your course, that is going to help drive your choice of workouts if you have minimal time for what you need to do. So we can see, we'll switch slides there. That was Alaska Man. And you can see that nice little trail that we had to run. Understand that I live in Wilmington, North Carolina, which is right on the beach, which that is the largest mountain that maybe I've seen. And I would, how do I train for that here? How do I train for Norseman, which has taken me 7 years, to get into living where, our biggest hill might be a small bridge to get over, the beach. So knowing your course with minimal time is going to help drive your training. Extreme tries are usually hilly. So, if we have limited time, we can either, at least here, we can go for an hour ride into the wind. Wind never stops. At least the hill goes up and you get to go down. I guess you could turn around, then you have tailwind, but, going into the wind, a short trainer ride with some strength endurance work, getting to the gym and climbing, the Stairmaster. What can you do if we know what kind of course we're going to be on? Comfort, being able to hold your preferred position on your chosen bike. I love that. I love that we just had that in there. Preparing for a cold water swim. So we all know that getting to the pool, it really takes a lot of time. You have to, pack your gear, get to the pool, take a shower, get home. So if you have a choice of preparing for a cold water swim and I have a chance to go do open water when it's, 50 degrees, that is often better than, than going to the pool. So making that decision. Gearing on your bike, which we kind of just had a little discussion about, and really just finding your rhythm out there running. And a lot of times that is, you often don't even need long, runs with a lot of volume. Just being able to go out for these 30-minute runs, which I'll mention and chat about, building durability, just getting your legs to be able to snap into that rhythm, that will pay huge dividends because your body will remember that come race day. I promise it will. So how are we going to make this fit? We have all these things that we have to do. So the weekly training session short. Oftentimes you can divide these out. You have a 30 minutes here, you have 30 minutes here, you have 30 minutes here. You may not have an entire hour and a half, 90 minutes to get something done. That pays huge dividends for a lot of different reasons. It allows for quick recovery. You can maintain the consistency, all of what we chatted about. It also helps create fatigue resistance, because I often have discussions with my athletes. If you can get up in the morning and you can do a 45-minute workout, you are going to go to work for 8-9 hours out of your day if you have an active job. If you come back home and can put in another run or get in a trainer session or even a strength session, you're building durability. You're building fatigue resistance, because remember, it's all in the same bucket. Stress on our body is all in the same bucket. Focus on quality of every session that you do, having a purpose for it. And there's always something that you can get done. Going back to consistency is king. Consistency is king. Frequent bricks, off the bike runs, finding that rhythm, and then having a standardized schedule, I think helps. If you have even if your work schedule changes, and I do coach a lot of nurses that work, these 12-hour shifts, and they switch around during the week. If you can lay out your week, or you can lay out 2-week, usually a 3-week block is good, and see what you want to get in. But knowing what's coming on Monday, what's coming on Tuesday, what's coming on Wednesday, helps you get into that discipline. And then you know how to handle it and how to make it happen. So the first thing is, why are frequent and shorter sessions good? Because a lot of things, people think you have to be out there for a long time. And I'm not going to argue the fact that, yes, you do. We do need some longer volume days. as we're getting into our peak kind of phase and whatnot. So the next slide, we frequent and shorter sessions have the ability to do a lot of great things in your body. They can trigger small and consistent adaptations. They are efficient, and you can be, you know, we want to be in zone 2, so you can do that for over the course of a day. They also will, there was a study published that shows, so the mitochondria, which we heard about in the first session, are kind of like your energy producing machines that are in your body. And you can either make those mitochondria bigger, or you can produce a lot more of them and they can become more dense. So there was a study that showed that twice a day training actually improves your mitochondrial efficiency. It's not going to necessarily make them more dense, but it is going, the ones that you have, it is going to actually make them more efficient. So if we can do that in a minimal time frame, I mean, that's going to pay huge dividends, because remember, your mitochondria is what helps create your energy system by breaking down the proteins and the carbs. So if we can make what we have more efficient on a little bit less time and give us time so we can sleep at night, which is key, then why wouldn't we do that? You know, we get so busy thinking we've got to build those adaptations and build more mitochondria, which ultimately is a good thing. And, you know, we're not going to argue to that, but we're talking about training in the context of a busy life. So that paper right there, which is a great study to read, it does go into a lot of physiology for everybody that wants to read it, clearly showed that twice a day training helps, right? So like I said, if you have short blocks, let's do it. I mean, let's make that happen, because we are going to get stronger that way. We are going to, you know, build adaptation to our body, you know, to be able to handle. On the next slide, and I think I kind of, you know, talked about that. There's a little picture of your mitochondria too, of what it looks like. But fatigue resistance can also be trained in multiple short sessions per day, and that goes along with everything else that's in the context of our day. We have long days. You're going to have a long day out there for the XTRI or for any long course in general. So we're going to be able to build that fatigue resistance and that durability if we come in at the end of a day and try and do a session. Back quickly in regards to mitochondrial efficiency, what they did find is that if you do your zone 2 work first, that kind of depletes some of those glycogen stores. And because you're not building them back up through the day, when you go back, if you do a high intensity short workout at the end of the day with some, you know, lots of intervals based on time, trying to get them done, or you want to go swim, you know, with paddles. But if you do high intensity or power workouts second, that really helps more than doing it the opposite way around, because you're working on a tired body. So just kind of, you know, putting that in there. If you're going to structure it, go ahead and get that, you know, zone 2 or durability run done in the morning, and then come back in and hit it at night with some short, high intensity or power intervals. And that will definitely help. So the other, we can flip to the next slide. That talks about, you know, the shorter runs that we've got. They're really good for building durability. Oftentimes I'll add walks in the middle of the day. This is going back to our short and frequent. If you're going to do a short run, work, if you can get outside for 30 minutes, go do a brisk walk. If you have any hills around, that's even better. Finish your work day, you know, and then do a high intensity. You're going to get a lot of gains from that. And then just kind of a sample calendar, really establishing the perfect week and finding a week that is accomplishable for you, not for your friend, you know, down the street, but what can you get done to make positive adaptations to your body. Then quality of sessions, which is the next slide. So this goes back to knowing your course, knowing what you have to get done to be able to accomplish that course, and building those sessions around that. And this goes back, we all hear we don't want to do junk miles. And I think it becomes really important in the context of, you know, of all of us that are trying to accomplish a lot, you know, in our day. So you have to build an efficient aerobic base. So that is going to take some longer rides, you know, as you get into your peak phase. Building durability and resilience, fatigue resistance, Generally time on your feet. So if you have an opportunity to go hike, most of these XTRIs are certainly hilly and there's a mountain to climb at the end. So if you have the opportunity to go do a 2-hour hike versus a 2-hour run here at Wrightsville Beach, and we know what we should pick. So that's where I talk about the quality of sessions, and if we have minimal time, choosing what is important for you, and then frequent transition runs. So you can go get long hikes, even long walks on your feet for a lot of us who may be walking at the end of a lot of us are walking at the end of these of some of these XTRIs. And then if you do frequent short transition runs, that builds your body's memory, and you're going to get off the bike and you're going to run, and then you're going to transition to walking because you're going to be there on your feet. So being able to choose the quality of sessions. So we have training, the short intervals are great, the quality of sessions. And then I would argue that the next one that we have up here, I probably should have put first, but I put it third, which is strength, durability. You've got to be able to build a strong body to get through these. And I will often say that really is what we should do first. And honestly, to go these longer distances and to even do these longer training sessions, you need to be strong to do that, because that's when compensations start to crop up after 4 hours on the bike. If we're not strong enough to be able to sit in that aero position, to be able to hold that aero position if you're going to ride a TT bike, or even if you're going to ride in the drops. So we need to be strong, and that encompasses our entire body, from our neck, our shoulders, obviously for the swim, core, sitting on the bike for that long, we need to have a strong core, swim. And then obviously, certainly, our lower body needs to be strong. So strength sessions are huge to do. So if you can err on the side of choosing a strength session, and some people, I've had lots of this discussion with coaches, but I always say, if you can err on the side of a strength session, even versus maybe heading to the pool for another swim, unless we really need to work on the swim, and that might be individual, let's go get strong, because that is going to pay huge dividends at the ends of these races, is being able just to build a strong. And you can kind of take a look at some of what I wrote up there too. And I think we'll put these out. So, building the perfect week. Now we get down to the nitty gritty of this, right? So lay out your week, your absolutes. If you have to work 8 to 5 every day, that has to be done. If your daughter has soccer games on Thursday nights, you put that in there too. And this kind of helps you see really how much time you have. I will tell you that I have gotten the majority of my athletes to the XTRI finish line, and I know that people are going to gasp, in probably 10 to 12 hours a week. Now they have to have a block in time in there where they can go for longer rides, so that doesn't hold true for across the whole entire course. But we can get you there in that for the majority of your time, especially if you want to finish. Now, if we want to race one, that is going to be a different story. But for a lot of us that want to finish one, you can do it. And there you go. The key things: 2 sessions a day, fitting it in, building fatigue resistance, power, and then knowing your strengths and weaknesses and where you need to, to really focus. Paddles are your friend. Big gear, hill work, or where I am, wind resistance. And I do say it is harder to ride into the wind any day than climb a mountain. Oh, it never ends. It just never ends. Hill repeats, lots of hiking, walking, time on your feet. If you have not walked for 2 hours, it's hard. Walking briskly versus maybe walking, I don't have a dog that's going to walk for 2 hours, but, is a little bit different. But, some things just to keep in mind, in regards to that. And then the last thing that I have to mention is you really need to have a support system for when the going gets tough, right? And that is because there are going to be times when your bucket is going to be full, your bucket is going to want to overflow, and you are going to need to you're going to need to have a support system. Besides the fact somebody's going to be there with you on race day. So, to be able to talk to that, but they're also part of this training, right? Because they know how your training is going, where they're going to meet you on the bike. If somebody is, going up the mountain with you, what you're going to need to eat. So these are just some fun pictures from some of the XTRIs that I've done. But a support system is huge. And I would say I would build that now, along with what you've got. So I know I kind of, blew through, a lot of things just like everybody did, because I would rather take, questions if anybody has questions, because this is a lot more fun to answer questions about and, and talk about. But I will tell you, it can be done. Know your why, see, fatigue, strength, shorter, frequent, quality, brick, standardized schedule. And if you can remember this slide right here, you can do it. I know you can. I promise you can. I promise.
Great. Thanks for that, Sammy. That was great. Don't wait for the right opportunity, create it. I like that. It's a good one. The other one I like is that was kind of related to your first part of your presentation there, where you're talking about consistency. Is enthusiasm is common, but endurance is rare. And that's actually from a book called Grit. I forget the author, but like I'm often reminded of this when I do my sort of year plans for my athletes, and I ask them, what your goals are for this year, and what are the things you'd like to accomplish, where do you want to put your energies, what do you want to improve at most, blah blah. And they get all fired up, and they're like, oh, I want to do this and this, and I've got these races and this stuff, and then sometimes that only lasts a short time, and actually the endurance to meet those goals and kind of the continued dedication, discipline and consistency doesn't come through. And it's like you said, you've really got to balance the choice of goals with your lifestyle, what you realistically can do in a week, and what is sort of what you're capable of in your life. So
that's so true. And I find it so helpful to lay it out and see it, right? Everybody, when you're talking to everybody, they're, oh, I can do this. Yes, sir. I can swim on Tuesday. I can swim on Thursday. We can run Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I can bike here and there. And then you lay it out in the week. And then you start saying, well, when am I going to eat? And when am I going to sleep? And I've got to, walk the dogs, and I've got to take, my daughter to dance class. And, oh yeah, I need to coach my son's basketball team. And then all of a sudden it becomes very daunting. And I find that's when athletes tend to just become overwhelmed. So it's so easy just to start with that schedule and write in your absolutes, what has to happen during the week. Then we can work the training in and take into all those other considerations of what, of what your goals are and what race you want to accomplish. And then we put that in on top of it.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know if you found this, but I think what I definitely see is, people overestimate quite often what they can do. And quite often I'll give somebody a program and they say, oh, I can do more than that. There's not enough in here, or, sort of, oh, why have I not got this session or that session? And I always just sort of say, well, let's see how you get on. Let's do this for a few weeks. And if it's all going brilliantly and you're consistent with this many hours across, a month, then we'll increase it. And, I think sometimes when you talk about being overwhelmed, athletes get to the point where they're overwhelmed. That's the point at which they start doing nothing. Do you find that? So it goes from like, I can do all of this, and suddenly they miss a couple of days, and then I can't do any of it.
So I find that's exactly what happens, right? And so that's why we just need to start. And if I have to choose something, I say, well, let's start with strength work. Go get to the gym,
sure.
And let's make that happen. And then we'll start with that. Yeah, it definitely, I find that happens quite frequently.
Yeah.
So
You've got some cooking going on in the background there.
I do. Well, you have to eat. Well, you have to fuel.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
We all have to fuel. But yes, that is so true, and I see that. And everybody, I didn't put in the other thing that, or I guess Sammyisms that I call, lots of coaches probably say, is fatigue is cumulative, right? They say we can do more, we can do more, and then you give them more, and then all of a sudden in 4 weeks they're tired.
Yeah,
and then think, we can't do anything.
Yeah, and I think this is a really important lesson for people who are self-coaching, or even people who do already have a coach. You know, just be honest with yourself, with your coach. But if you're not being coached, then just with yourself. Be honest with yourself about how you feel about your training. So if you set yourself 8 hours a week, but every time you go to a session, you think, oh my God, I've got 10 other things I should be doing. This is really stressful. I'm not enjoying this session. Then you need to kind of think about how you've scheduled and structured your week and how you can make that more attainable. Because
exactly, it needs to be fun, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're most of us, I mean, it needs to be fun, right? You need to look forward to going out there to train. You know, I mean, we want to keep it fun. I mean, and that's right, keep that session in there where you meeting your friends for, you know, a ride, right? I mean, that's important. And then, you know, we can build on that, but definitely keep that in the mix, right? Yeah. Okay, you want to go.
Yeah. So, okay. So there's a question. Sorry, by the way, everyone who's watching live, if you do have questions, pop them in the comments under the video and I will feed them to Sammy. But you know, until we get any, I'll continue to just we
can continue to talk, because that may spur somebody to say, oh, I'm trying to lay out my week, and what should we do?
Yeah, for sure. So just to come on to recovery, because I think that's something as well that I certainly feel is not prioritized enough in people's lives. So when they're doing their sort of laying out their training program and their schedule for the week, what do you advise about kind of putting recovery in there?
So a couple of things. One, sleep is I mean, I'll look at this and be like, well, when are we going to sleep? I mean, you know, we've got sleep's when you do your best recovery. So many athletes now have a lot of those Oura rings and the Whoop straps too. And that actually is kind of interesting data. And then when they see that, it's kind of like, oh, I only slept 5.5 hours. Oh, I only slept 6 hours. And, you know, you can see that in there. So, but they need to build in time to sleep. I mean, that is key. And I always say block out. A lot of athletes don't sleep 8 hours, although we know that at least 7. You know, we have to block out some of that time. I try and put in recovery days. I use a lot of active recovery days, since I do a lot of, now I obviously have some athletes that want to do a lot of volume too, but we're talking about this in the context, you know, of athletes that are trying to fit it all in. You know, I may not do a set 100% rest day, although I think that those have to come in. But I do a lot of active recovery days where I might, you know, we're going to go to a yoga class, not a hot yoga class, but a restorative yoga class, right? Or we are going to go do a recovery swim, right? Where you're just there's not going to be a swim workout. We're not going to be on intervals. You're going to get in, you're just going to, no paddles, leave all your gear. We're just going to go do a nice, you know, recovery type swim. I will build those kind of sessions in. I would like to build in time when I put the times in for the workouts. I like to say, okay, yes, you have a 4-hour ride, but reality, you've got this 4-hour ride, plus it's really going to take you 5 hours, right? Because you need to build in a half an hour afterwards unless you're going to, you know, for your recovery drink, so you can refuel, you know, for some light stretching, you know, and then you're going to change your clothes, you're going to get ready, you're going to go on to your day. So I try and overestimate the timing in there, you know, when I'll put those workouts in for it too, to kind of as reminders to say, hey, it really takes longer than 4 hours that you're riding. Yeah,
and I think that's a really important point actually, is I find a lot of people don't, what I call, absorb the workout. So it's a concept I think I picked up years ago from Chris McCormack, from his book, and he's, you know, whatever you think of Chris McCormack, he's got some great stuff in his first book, Here to Win. And that's one of the things that he talks about. And I think it's really true, especially with people who are trying to squash in long distance endurance training into a busy lifestyle, is they don't leave time, to get in the door, to stretch, to sit down and absorb that workout, to have the food, to, just to rest and recover from that workout. So if you sort of squash it in too much to getting home and you're actually on your feet for another 3 hours afterwards, because you're doing all the housework or you're running around trying to get kids sorted, or whatever it is you're doing at work, then you've got to factor that into your sort of fatigue levels.
Right, that definitely builds in. And so I will always remind that. Usually when I'm writing a plan for somebody, I'll put, save time for stretching or refueling, or whatever our focus is for the day. And it's just a reminder, and it's a reminder to them to write to do it, or to at least then they have to say they didn't do it.
So then you can say, well,
and then they'd say they didn't do it, and so then they come up 3 or 4 weeks later, and you're like, well, you jumped off the bike, we've ridden 3 hard hours 3 weeks in a row, and now your hamstring is tight, or whatever. Well, let's revisit what just happened 3 weeks ago. So it's funny. I'm guilty of that too, right? I try and fit it all in. I'm very guilty, but I've learned that I need to, at least you've got to save some time at the end, even if you're cutting the workout 15 minutes short. It is better to cut it a little bit short to make sure you I like that phrasing, absorb it on the back end, so then you can be like, oh, look what I just did. Whew, okay,
for sure.
Okay,
so one last thing I just wanted to talk about was specificity. You kind of covered this a little bit in your talk. It's something that I'm really keen on for XTRI specifically, and I think it's where XTRI perhaps differs from other standard triathlons. And I just, like, you were talking about the choice between running on the beach or going for a 2-hour hike in the mountains, and that's a really good example. One of the things I always recommend to my athletes and friends who are going off to do XTRIs or have another type of adventure is to do the research. And that's partly why I created this Facebook group, is, to give Women of XTRI a place to ask questions about these races, because there is no better resource than somebody who's already been there, done the race, had that experience, and not just the race itself, but the whole logistical challenge that goes with getting to some of these places. But do it in advance. So do it, when you decide you're doing that race, that's when to start doing your homework and start understanding what 3,000 meters of elevation on a bike feels like, or what running up a mountain at the end of a marathon feels like. So what are some of your top tips for that?
So that's a great question. And especially, I think it differs depending on where you live, right? And I'm just going to speak quickly from where I live, because where I live is flat. It is, I mean, so it's a challenge. We can go for a 100-mile bike ride, and you might climb, we think in feet, but what, 200 feet? I mean, like nothing, right? So for us here, it involves making some adaptations to the training. We're going to probably sit on the trainer more, even when we want to be outside, right? Just because those adaptations, we can do heavy gear work, strength endurance work. You can do that, and that's going to pay much better dividends doing that for 3 hours than it is probably going to ride once you've been able to cover the distance. I'll speak to Swedman in specific. So that bike course, is 127 miles. That's a long bike course. There is a huge difference in biking 127 miles and then biking what your standard century that a lot of people go to do. I mean, you're on the bike for at least 90 minutes or more, which is a long time in regards to fueling, and other things to do, and then have to go run. So that is an adaptation that had to be made. We did have to do some longer bike rides, but for us here where it's flat, is that, and that's why I kind of harp on strength work so much, because we do run on all the flats here, right?
Yeah.
Which is
Okay.
is different, the different muscles. So going into the gym and building strength, but I think that is some of the best things that you can do.
Yeah, I agree.
Um,
And I think even if you do have mountains available, and I'm really lucky where I live in that I've got both. I can ride on the flat all day if I want to, but I've also got right outside my door a sort of mountain that I can ride up. But even then, you know, I think there's a lot of benefit to be had from things like using a box step at the end of a run workout. You know, and just, or like doing some hard weights at the end of a run workout and just building that real power, strength, endurance, and tired muscles. So, I mean, I incorporate that sort of training, even though I can go and run up a hill, because actually sometimes running up a hill and running back down again is more impact on your joints that you don't necessarily need in a high volume phase of training. So yeah, so it's just sort of understanding and learning the options that are available to you in your surroundings, and then learning about the course you're going to do and how to put the two together. It's certainly something that I could talk all day about. So if anyone's got any questions on that in the group, you know, about specificity and trying to train for a race, you know, that's different to the environment they live in, then they can ask away.
Yeah, we do that some. So we'll finish a long ride and then we will head out. We do have one small hill here where we live. So we'll start and end our bike, right? I mean, we have one. So we'll start and end our bikes from there. And then we get off the bike and we just walk a couple, you know, we walk, and it's short, but we can walk up and down a few times to do something like that. And being able to simulate coming off the bike and heading out into the terrain that you're doing. It's challenging. Yeah. If you live flat and you know, are racing mountains. Yeah. Just like it's challenging, I'll say, if you live mountains and you race flat, which not many XTRIs are flat, but Alaska Man was fairly flat, honestly.
We try not to let them be flat, I think, is the thing.
Right.
That would be too easy.
That's right.
Cool. All right, Sammy, that was really good. Really nice to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us. That
was great.
Giving
and
us your wisdom.
If anybody has any questions, just reach out. I'm happy to chat. I love chatting, tries, training, you know.
What's the best way for people to get hold of you?
I like to check this Facebook page, so that's super easy, or they can go to Fusion Endurance Coaching and ask some questions there, or email me at Sammy@Fusion Endurance Coaching that way.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. Well, I hope everyone's enjoyed that. And we'll make this available in the future, and we'll put some links on the Facebook page. So if people want to go back and review any of what's been said and have a listen again, then they can do that and share it with anyone who's missed it. So great. Thank you so much.